Hi, I'm Ash.
And I'm Callie.
And welcome to Pave with Gold, the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast. I would first like to acknowledge the traditional landowners on which Callie and I are recording and extend the same respect to the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are all listening. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Hi, Cal.
Hello.
How's your week been?
A blur.
A blur. New mum life.
It's like, what day is it? Is there a difference into my days anymore? Anyway, no, it was good. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. Busy.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this record so that I could tell you my lunchroom story.
Please.
Yeah. So because of COVID, I haven't been going into any offices, and I've now got like a full-time gig where I'm in the office 3 days a week, and I forgot just how terrible it is to make your lunch in the lunchroom with everybody else there. And look, I'm not going to throw shade on anybody. It's like,
no, please do. Go for it.
No. It really isn't that bad. Like, I just remember, like, I go into the lunchroom and all I see is just this sea of just really boring salads. Like, there's nothing in it. It's lettuce and vegetables.
Tuna?
Sometimes there's tuna. Other times it's just like avocado. I'm just like, okay.
Huh?
It's like this. That's great. What's for lunch? And there I am.
Nice side salad.
Yeah, I was like, that's a great snack. Awesome. Like,
Well, not even though.
even then,
Is it?
is it a great snack? I don't know. Again, no. Like,
Side salad.
If that's what you want to eat, go for it. I'm never going to shame anybody because. But then I'm sitting there, I'm like standing there, and I've either got, pasta that I'm reheating, like leftovers, or I had this, it was leftover tacos without the taco shells because we ate them all, and I had like just put rice in instead, and yeah, like this like hodgepodge of rice and cheese and beans and it's so good,
Just delicious.
and I was there mixing it all up, and there's this lady, and she's just putting a salad in a bowl, and I'm just like, and like the back of my mind, I'm like, well, everyone else is doing this. Maybe I should be doing. And then I'm like, hold on, whoa, mine has cheese and yours doesn't. So I think I know who's winning here.
I was going to say, who's the real winner here, right?
Exactly.
Oh, I remember those days.
It's just like you just have you sort of catch yourself when you think of how far you've come, but also how easy it is, even after all this time, to still like can get weirdly triggered.
Yeah.
And it's kind of those things where you do have to just stop yourself. And I think that's what we were chatting last time about. Yep. Which was, even being recovered, I should say.
Being fully recovered. Yeah.
You still have those moments where you have to be, the thoughts come running through your brain, and you like, you start to think, oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Oh, no.
Diet culture, right?
Diet culture.
So sneaky how it's just everywhere. It's in the bloody lunchroom. Like, I remember, oh gosh, when I'd have to go into the office and you just hear diet talk at every table.
Constantly.
And what gym routine, and this is the smoothie I'm having for lunch. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I'm so sorry that you've been.
It's like, oh, I'm so sorry you've been so lied to. Like, are you happy?
Yeah, right. Like,
and then the worst is when they either say, well, especially when I was like unwell and I was bringing my lunch in, it's like, oh my God, you're so healthy. It's like, oh, honey, if you only knew.
It's like, this is not health.
Like, this is not.
Do not be fooled.
Yes, please don't do this. This is a terrible idea.
Like, I'm not enjoying myself right now.
Yeah.
Please go.
Or the other way, which again, someone mentioned, it's like, oh wow, like you must be really hungry to eat. Like, are you going to eat all that? I'm like, yes, I am. It's just like, I am 5'11". Yes, I need all of this.
Yeah.
And especially this week, I mean, it's been like super busy at work, and I forgot just how much energy it takes for your brain to work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of motherhood, which is funny.
Fun that.
Everything reminds me of motherhood these days. No, but in the way that, post-baby, you're meant to lose, your baby weight and all that sort of crap. But you get like people like, oh my God, like I'm wanting to eat more food and I'm wanting to, I'm just so hungry all the time. It's like, yeah, no shit, because you're tired, A. B, you're looking after this small human, which is very physically demanding and like...
You're trying to keep this human
tiring.
alive. That's
right.
Exhausting.
It is so exhausting. Plus, you're just exhausted. You're tired. You don't sleep much. So your body's going to be extra hungry because it's just looking for energy. It's just looking for, but yet there's all these people around me like trying to just like suppress that and like, this is a problem. It's like, no, it's not a problem. It's just you eat more because you actually need it. It's just wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Look, if you want to have your salads for lunch, go for it. And I'm not knocking a salad. I love
love salads. Yeah,
salads
absolutely.
are great. But if it's just, lettuce leaves and a bit of veggies with some dressing, I'm going to be hungry in about 2 seconds.
That's not a salad.
That's just,
I used an analogy. I always use this analogy of like, I'm so hungry, like I want to eat my arm. And I just feel like if that was my lunch, I'd be like gnawing on my arm within 5 minutes. So anyway, Ash, I think this week we are going to hear a little bit more about you and your story and, how we got here today with you being who you are, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I hate to use the word journey. I really hate
journey,
that word.
story, one of them.
I'm just yet to find a better word.
Yeah.
Like we need to come up with a better word. But anyway, so we are lucky enough to be able to, hear a bit more about your journey through your eating disorder. And I'm really excited to hear it. And I'm sure everyone else is too.
I have sort of my normal script, so to speak.
Yep.
When I'm talking to, whether it be professionals or whether it's talking to, people who are in recovery. Like I did a podcast episode recently for Body Matters, and there's like a certain story that you kind of follow with that. But so I went back to my notes about what I was going to talk about here, and there was definitely a chunk of it that I guess I'm adding now at the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is all about, I think, a lot of the things that we want to talk about on this podcast, which is how it all started.
Yeah.
My childhood in terms of key things that totally make sense about how I ended up where I did. But now,
absolutely, because it's relevant, right?
It's super relevant.
Absolutely relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when I look back at sort of my history, I don't ask myself why I got an eating disorder. I ask myself why the hell I didn't. Like, the foundation was there, so it makes total sense.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so I'll just jump straight in.
Please.
So when I was growing up, diet culture was rife. I was very lucky in that I don't have a lot of, I didn't have any childhood trauma. I was, I grew up in a very loving, household, parents who, cared about me and my sister a lot. And, it was, I don't really have that many criticisms. So shout out parents, you did a great job. Don't worry, I was the one who screwed it up later. It's all good. I was a very anxious child. I do remember that. Looking back, hindsight 2020, I was always really anxious. I always needed to know what was going on, where we were going, the plans, all of that kind of thing. I was never just a go with the flow kind of kid.
Yeah.
So funny. I'm just a highly anxious person. And then it turned out to have a crazy gnarly anxiety disorder, still to this day, which is fun. But
shout out to anxiety.
Ew, it's so much fun. But yeah, it's, I definitely grew up in a diet culture Weight Watchers family. Look, my mum is one of my best friends, and I'm never going to say anything bad about her, but her relationship with food growing up was very, troubling, and it makes me sad looking back now for what I do know, and with me trying to unlearn a lot of fat phobic sort of rhetoric in my head of the kind of things that she would say about herself, or how much she used to worry about what she ate, and how she would cook things that are completely separate for her and then separate to what the family was eating, and how she just had this terrible negative body image. And she's never been big. In fact, she's right now she's very small. She's very petite. She fits under my chin. Also, growing up and still now, my mum's my superhero. She is just one of my absolute idol, my pinnacle of strength. Yeah. And then it's just sad to to see someone that you love and admire so much think really poorly about themselves. Yeah. And so I'm not surprised that sort of a lot of that sort of, that thinking definitely weaved its way into my psyche.
Totally.
Kids are just sponges, right? They'll absorb anything.
That's one of the biggest problems, of today. So
yeah. And again, no shade. Absolutely. They were a product of the time, that kind of mentality. Weight Watchers was massive.
Oh my God, yes.
If you haven't listened to it, go check out Maintenance Fade podcast, not sponsored.
I was just thinking.
Yeah, the Weight Watchers episode is just
fantastic.
Aubrey and
mind.
Michael Hobbs just completely destroy it. It's great listening.
It's like factual. It's like fierce. It's funny. It's just, please go listen.
Yeah. Growing up, I was very lazy. I was a very sedentary kid, but both my parents were very active. And so,
Yeah.
and my dad is an athlete. He's, he rows competitively still. My mum played, tennis every single week, twice a week. So I always had this expectation that I should be doing more. And they had these ideas of physical activity that they would say you should go out and do exercise, and I was just like, no, I don't want to. But I was so lazy. I hated team sports, still do, can't stand it. I'm very much a solo activity person. But it's all of these things that sort of just piled on and on, these little pieces that formed this mess later. But
like this crazy puzzle.
And, I also did, modeling as a kid and as a teenager, which is a whole extra thing, Wow. So the demonizing of food, of good and bad, and the things that you should be doing, and diet culture was just so prevalent all throughout my childhood. I always had very high achieving parents. My family, my sister as well, that we were all very high achieving. And so this kind of degree of perfectionism was 100% always, it was ever present. And there's one thing that, again, no shade on my parents, but there's one thing that always stuck with me. My dad, as an athlete, he would say about himself, never to, us kids, but he would always say, oh, you don't win silver, you lose gold. And this idea, exactly. And he would say that about himself, but never about to the kids or anything. They were always so supportive.
No, but you're listening, aren't you?
Like I said, kids are sponges. And if that's kind of the thing that has been modeled for you, you can't help but say, well, why does one thing apply for him and not apply for me?
That's it, isn't it?
It's those little nuggets from your childhood that just kind of stay with you. And it's just, it's amazing what sticks. And all of these things, when you kind of know how it ends, it's like the biggest foreshadowing.
It's like, no wonder.
Exactly. No wonder it manifested the way it did later.
Yeah. And it's like never like the thing that did it, but it's just added up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I went to an all-girls school, which was you really thrive in that environment, don't you? So there was high school bullying, junior school bullying, all that kind of stuff. But, I don't think that is it's not a unique part to any person's story, really. If you can survive school, that's pretty much your main objective. And it's tough. It's a tough environment for anybody. So I was really, really anxious. But then I think the biggest thing for me when sort of everything started to unravel was right after I finished high school. So my parents got divorced. My on and off again relationship kind of fell apart. He was like my first love, and we're great mates now. Like, he's my bestie. But at the time, that was, absolute tragedy.
Devastating, right?
Absolute tragedy.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And then I was starting uni, so big change there. I had to move out of my childhood home, move in with my mum. And then my sister was also moving out probably before she wanted to, because it was her time. She's 3.5 years older than me. So she was a little bit before, and she knew she probably needed to move out, but it was kind of forced upon her. And so she was leaving. That's kind of when my depression started. Yeah. And you just you feel like you're losing control. Everything's going wrong.
You need to try and regain some control here.
I love it when you transition into exactly, So I tried to regain some control. But honestly, I can remember the day it all changed, clear as day. I know exactly.
Really?
I know exactly where. Yeah, the exact turning point.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was in my third year of uni.
Yeah.
Or second year of uni. I think it was second year. And pretty much up until that point, I had always assumed that I weighed a specific weight. I'm not going to say what it is. There's no point. It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I'd never bothered to check what my weight was. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm this number.
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, you can see where it's going. So I thought, oh, shits and giggles, let me jump on a scale and see how much I weigh.
Shits and giggles. Woohoo!
It was not shits and giggles for Bodhi.
No.
But yeah, I was quite a lot higher than I thought I was. And that kind of was just this massive jolt in me. Sure. And ironically, it's the number it was is essentially exactly where I am right now. Very comfortably at my set point. It's almost like that's where I'm supposed to be.
Crazy that, right? Like you hadn't weighed yourself for so long, so your body just settled into this, natural spot.
Intuitive eating, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah,
like, sure,
funny.
I'm pretty sure my body composition was different because right now, now I have a healthy relationship with exercise, and back then I just didn't do anything. But,
yeah.
So obviously I look different, but the number is pretty much exactly the same. Again, it's almost like the number doesn't matter.
Go figure.
So I can remember that day, and I said in my head, all right, I'm going to go on a health kick, the innocent health kick.
Woohoo!
Woo! Which turned out to be anything but.
But how did that go?
Well, we're here, so I think we know how that went.
But please tell me.
So it pretty much I said, all right, I'm gonna get my diet together. I'm gonna start exercising. I'm gonna do the thing that everyone tells you that you need to do.
Yeah.
So I did what any person would do when they want to start a diet is you just start by counting calories. Yeah. And just pretty much logging everything I ate, and I set myself a goal which I thought was a healthy goal, and it was not.
Yeah.
Because you just take what the diet industry tells you is a good idea, and it's not.
I was going to ask that question. Do you think, like, looking back now and you look at this goal that you set yourself, do you think it was in line with what you were being told and like the messages you were sent by diet culture and the health and fitness industry?
100%. I was...
Yeah, interesting.
I wouldn't say I went really crazy straight away. From what I knew, I said, all right, I'm going to just cut down a little bit.
Yeah.
But then a little bit becomes a bit more.
Oh,
and a bit more.
It's never enough.
It's never enough. And then you kind of just get really competitive again.
Yeah.
I'm, hardwired to be a perfectionist.
Here we go. Yeah.
You just want to kind of beat that number every single day. It's like, oh, well, I have all of this left over. I can do less the next day. And then
I survived. So
obviously I'm doing something right. And naturally, when you start restricting, the weight starts to come off. So this was cool. This is exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Everything was being, affirmed.
Yeah.
People were noticing. Have you lost weight? You look great. It's like, just point blank. Just don't comment on people's weight. Just don't. There's no need to.
There's literally no need to. Like, you do not need to see somebody and say, oh, you look,
You look so skinny.
or you look good even. Like, be careful with that bloody comment. Like,
Because you never know what it takes for someone to get there. Or say, oh, you look really happy today. Or,
your hair looks great today.
yeah, just don't, say, oh, that's a great outfit. Or,
Oh, there's so many different compliments you can have that are just not image focused.
exactly. Or when in doubt, just don't say anything.
If you cannot think of something that isn't to do with someone's actual what their body looks like, just don't say it. Just say hello.
Yeah. How's your day going?
Yeah, what'd you do yesterday? How's the weather?
What's the haps?
What's the haps? Please don't say that.
But yeah, so pretty much from this whole health kick, it took literally 4 months. That's all it took. 4 months for things to get real bad.
Yeah.
I not only lost a dangerous amount of weight, and I hit my goal in 4 months, which was not a healthy goal and not a realistic goal. I lost weight I did not even need to lose anyway.
Yeah.
But more horrifically was that my relationship with food was it was shot to shit.
How was your mental state?
At that point, I felt accomplished. I'm like, okay, great. I've reached this goal.
Okay.
But then I already started to notice the fear of what would happen if I started to eat regularly again.
Interesting.
It's almost like I'd completely forgotten.
Yeah.
I think I just became super controlling and not wanting to go out as much because I didn't know how much was in what I was eating, and I wanted to have complete control over what I was putting into my body.
Yeah.
And so you just have that fear of what will happen when you lose control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'll just kind of, keep going. Like at that point, I didn't have, as much body dysmorphia as I probably did maybe a little bit later. But it was definitely this fear of if I go back to normal eating, I will get fat, quote unquote. And given everything that I'd grown up with, that was like the worst thing that could happen.
What you're sold in society too, right? Yeah.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
But I say that it took it only took 4 months, but in those 4 months, I did not actually notice. Like it really happened quite slowly, and you don't even actually realize that they creep up.
Sneaky,
and I mean,
yeah.
I would say in like the first probably 2 years after this, or maybe a year and a half, I wouldn't say that I had an eating disorder yet. Like it wasn't diagnosed at all.
Yeah, okay.
But it was definitely disordered eating. Like right now, I probably could have easily been diagnosed with something, but
yeah,
it wasn't. I was only diagnosed about a year and a half later, and at that point, it had already spiraled totally out of control, and I was already like medically high risk. In terms of, I'd started to see the effects, not just on my body, but like on the outside, but also inside.
And so you were saying you weren't diagnosed for about a year and a half after. What was going on with, say, like your family and stuff at this time? Like what were they noticing?
Well, the thing is, I didn't even talk about it. They knew that I was dieting.
Okay.
And that I was eating healthy.
Yeah.
But I think maybe they might have picked up on a few cues. Like it will be great eventually when we have our mums in here and we can like ask them these kind of questions. But in my head, I was like, they have no idea.
Of course.
They have no idea. And
yeah,
like my mum did tell me later on, she said, I didn't know how bad it was until, it all sort of came out. She said, I knew that there might be something going on, but she didn't realize how bad it actually was, which it makes sense because it's so common because you get really secretive because you just become so focused on this being your everything.
Yeah.
And you have nothing else going on. But at the same time, you want to keep it to yourself because we all know people love to offer their own advice. And it's like, no, I know what I'm doing. Total control. This is all mine.
Absolutely.
We said this before. We'll say it again. It is so important to try and catch these early warning signs and to intervene early. Yeah. Because if I had, if these behaviors had been spotted, diagnosed and treated from, probably whether it be that 4 months in or over that next year and a half.
Wouldn't have been so deeply ingrained, right?
Exactly. And it would have been a lot easier. And I wish that I had gotten help before I did because it only got worse and worse and it just, piles on.
Yeah.
And even as we'll get to, as you go through recovery, your eating disorder just morphs into completely different things and you just, it will always try and outsmart you and it will change its shape.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I've come out the other side, but I also, because I know it makes me who I am as a person, but at the same time, I wish that I had, stopped it then and there.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you can say that, it's made me who I am today and it's, it's made me this person that's sitting, in front of us. At the same time, though, I get really careful with people saying that to people because it's like, well, yeah, obviously, but I shouldn't have had to go through that to become this person.
Exactly.
I could have been, completely whole and somebody without having to go through a really horrific experience.
Yeah, I definitely missed out on certain things because I didn't get it treated early.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that year and a half before I was properly diagnosed, I would say that I went through a very destructive and traumatic relationship with food. It was pretty much after I kind of, hit that low point, it was, yo-yo dieting of restricting, then binging. And, I was absolutely miserable. But funnily enough, it came to a point where I felt like I did want to do something because I felt that something wasn't quite right. But I was going away on holiday and the last thing I wanted was that trip to be completely ruined by these destructive behaviors.
Yeah.
So like, okay, there is something wrong here and I want things to do differently so it doesn't impact this one thing.
That's huge, yeah.
we do need to hammer home the point that I was only able to get help for myself once I decided that I was ready.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to almost decide regularly if you're going to do it because whether it was before certain, admissions or certain like phases in your recovery, like it changes. Like you either just get so exhausted, it's like, well, screw it, I'm not going to bother anymore.
Yeah.
But at that point, I knew that I was so miserable and that I probably wanted help. But at the same time, I felt that no one understood what I was going through and that no one could help me because technically I wasn't, diagnosed with an eating disorder as we kind of know it diagnosed now.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I firmly believed that what I was feeling was so isolating. But then I took a punt on a book. We all know the book. It's 8 Keys to Recovering from an Eating Disorder by Carolyn Costin. Shout out Carolyn.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was when I read that, it was probably the first time that I realized I wasn't alone and that I actually do have a problem and I could actually realize what this problem was.
Yeah.
And that maybe I wasn't supposed to be this way.
Amazing. Yeah.
After that, honestly, reading that book allowed me to have a decent holiday. And while eating was definitely on my mind and I was freaking out, where's the nearest gym, which is totally something you should be worried about when you're with your family in Europe. God. But I at least managed to get through it and enjoy it. And I do have great memories from that trip. I also do remember certain things. I remember my sister was living there at the time and we were going to see Florence and the Machine in London. And
oh my God.
Right. And I was standing there and we were going to do a few days in Paris as a side trip.
Oh.
And I was standing in the concert freaking out that I wasn't going to have access to a gym for those 2 days in Paris. It's
isn't that just so typical? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow.
I was seeing, this great, amazing artist at this great show with my sister who I hadn't seen in a year.
Yeah.
And in London, about to go to Paris, and I was freaking out about.
And where was your brain?
Yeah. Where that's what I was most concerned about.
Yeah.
So that kind of paints a picture of how things, that they weren't great. I was still not, as bad as I probably could have been had I not read that book, but there was something not quite right.
Yeah.
But of course, when I got back, I thought, I'll just lose the holiday weight, because when you go to Europe and you're eating everything because that's amazing.
Because you're in Europe.
I figured, okay, I'll just lose the holiday weight. And that's when it really started to unravel at a very drastic pace. So it was my final year of uni. So it was crazy stressful. I was doing a major project. So I did a creative degree. So I kind of just did a major project right at the end. So again, super stressful. But that's when it went into full-blown anorexia.
Yeah.
And it just became my coping mechanism because I was so stressed and so miserable.
Yeah.
You just kind of cling to something that will help you get through it. And I always remember that I don't think I would have been able to get through my final year without my eating disorder.
Yeah.
But I also know that my eating disorder made my final year way worse.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it can serve so many different purposes and it can feel like it is such a friend almost, or, something that can get you through so many stressful situations and keep you safe. But at the same time, it's like there can be two truths at the same time.
I was just absolutely miserable, the whole time. I was, I definitely wish that I had done better in my final year. I say it like I did badly. I did very well because perfectionist. I had to, otherwise it was a disaster. But I wonder what my final year would have looked like if I had actually been healthy and well.
Yeah.
But it was about halfway through that year that I realized that I actually couldn't see how I was going to get out of this. And I was freaking out. And it was to that point where I lost so much control that I needed to give up a little bit in order to get it back.
Yeah.
So that's when I took my first active step, which was actually reaching out to someone on Instagram who has been very open about her experience, and she encouraged me to get help and even gave me the name of a GP in Sydney.
Wow.
Who was experienced in eating disorders, which of course is it can be such a critical point to find someone who, is aware of eating disorders.
Yeah.
Because it really can make a big difference.
If you're validated and taken seriously, absolutely.
Yeah. I was very lucky that I got that resource.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll take this opportunity now to say that if you are looking for, and you're in Australia and you're looking for practitioners, GPs, dietitians, psychologists who specialize in eating disorders, you can find them, you can find a list of these credentials at insideoutinstitute.org.au or anzaed.org.au. We'll link all of those in the show notes. But yeah, that's how you can find practitioners that can specialize in eating disorders, which makes a massive difference on
Huge.
Huge.
Cannot, stress that enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was very lucky. This GP sat there without judgment and listened to me and made me aware of the severity of my illness and that I actually needed help right away.
Yeah.
Because we always think that we're never sick enough, or I haven't been through this for long enough, or, but it's at that point, like there's no such thing as sick enough.
Did you feel like you were going to go to the GP and like, I don't know, like go into this GP appointment and like not waste their time, but like, they're not going to tell me anything. They're not going to be able to help me.
To be honest, I had no idea what I was expecting. I think because my parents are both, medical professionals. I've always had this, I've never had a fear of going into a doctor, or I've always been able to be very articulate in how I explain things about my body. And I was able to, say very easily what was going on.
Yeah.
And especially because I knew that she did specialize in eating disorders, I at least then knew, okay,
of course,
if I have one, she'll know.
Yeah, awesome.
And I was lucky in that I was able to do that, whereas I know that a lot of people don't have that privilege. But yeah.
And I guess body types as well, hey, like, I guess that comes into it. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I knew that, she just kind of sat there and made me realize that I needed help right away. And she also said that I needed to have an open and honest conversation with my parents, who up until that point, like we said, had mostly been in the dark about what was going on. Despite them being both medical professionals, I think eating disorders are a complete beast of their own, and they're so specific. So it can be really hard, I think. And also, even them being, in the medical field, they're also parents. They're parents first,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's so hard to look at your daughter as a patient, that's just not a thing.
Yeah.
So from there, I placed myself on a wait list for a private inpatient psychiatric facility because I was lucky enough to have private health insurance that would cover it.
Yeah.
But that was not before I had to complete my final semester of my honours degree. And that stress definitely made my condition way worse. And I didn't want to postpone it because I knew that I would have to then wait a full calendar year in order to do it again. And also, I guess I'd heard so many people who had to give up pause their degrees in order to, focus on recovery. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to do that. Of course, I think I definitely made myself sicker in the process, but I did it.
Yeah.
Would I do it the same again? Probably not. I don't know. I don't know what I'd do again, but I know that
you did the best you could at the time, right? Like with the information that you had, with the,
exactly.
Hindsight is beautiful.
Oh, it's wonderful. The other thing that was probably a big difference was after that, everything was kind of out in the open. So I wasn't in the closet, so to speak, anymore. So I could pretty much just do my behaviors in the open and not have to hide it anymore, which I'm sure was very traumatic to my family, my mum especially, who I was living with. And, but then because I didn't have to hide it as much, I think that also helped accelerate it.
How did that, so you mentioned the GP said to you, you need to have an open and honest conversation with your parents. I'm interested how that went, and, were they surprised? What was their reaction?
Well, I pretty much went straight from the GP's office, and she said I need to go straight to hospital because she was concerned about my heart.
Okay. Yep.
And she said, look, you need to go. So I had to say to my mum, look, I'm going to hospital right now. I need you to meet me there. And she's like, what? Why? And so I said, because I have a problem, and I think I do. And she said, I'll meet you there.
Wow. Oh, I've got goosebumps.
Yeah. And so obviously my parents are divorced. And so that was a difficult conversation, I'm sure, for my mum to have with my dad, who then came straight there. And I mean, they had, they get on when they have to. But I know that, when it comes to, the kids, they are 100% a united front, which
of course,
all
amazing.
Respect to them, which is, a lot of parents are unable to do that. And so major kudos to them for that.
Of course, yeah.
But that's kind of, we had to pretty much sit in the waiting room and the amount of love and support I got from both of them, which was, we're going to do this together, which again, super privileged to have that support network.
Yeah.
Both emotionally, financially, I was very lucky.
Can make the world of difference.
It can. But I was finally admitted to hospital in November of 2013, and that's kind of when all of it began. To be honest, I felt a tremendous sense of relief almost that I was actually, when I was first there, I felt validated that I was going through what, I was being recognized for the problem I did have and that I was actually getting help. Of course, it was really hard, don't get me wrong. It was, 13 weeks of strict weight gain meal plan, supervised meals, supervised snacks, sat through hours of bed rest.
Yeah.
Weights and vitals monitored every single day, as well as, group therapy and CBT treatment. Cognitive behavioral therapy for anyone who needs to know. And they needed to obviously get me physically stable more than anything. But obviously starting the very long and arduous mental rehabilitation, which we all know takes way longer. But I think the biggest thing was that I was finally around people who understood what I was feeling and we were going through it together. So there's definitely big benefits to group therapy and, inpatient treatment.
Yeah.
There is just some situations where it's just 100% necessary. You just need that medical intervention and you need it, Again, I was just very lucky to get it when I did. So, but I was on a great trajectory. I was feeling really positive. But we all know that recovery only really starts outside of hospital. And it is not straight. It is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But it just starts when you have to sort of monitor your own recovery in conjunction with, everyday life, being a human, going to work,
because you're in a very did you feel like you're in a little safe space in hospital almost? Like, you had your routine, you had, okay, I'm all good to go in the outside world because, I've done this every single day. And then you go in the outside world and there's,
I have to cook my own food, which was a whole separate thing. I not only have to follow this meal plan, but I have to do it, exactly the way that they told me. And I have to do it at the exact times that I was supposed to. And I needed to do it while my body was gaining weight because that was the main goal.
And in a very unsafe space of being out in the big bad world.
With all the triggers that, you're pretty much landing yourself back, you're putting yourself back into the exact environment that got you where you were.
Exactly.
Yeah. Eating disorder recovery follows a very similar trajectory to addiction and recovery from substances.
Yep.
And this is no slight on anyone who has, gone through those kind of recoveries. But with drugs or alcohol, you can abstain from those. Whereas food, you have to face.
You have to.
3 to 6 to 7, 8 times a day, depending on your meal plan. You have to face it every single day, as well as dealing with all those triggers because you have to eat to live.
Unavoidable.
I know, right? And I mean, I think a lot of people might think that once you go into hospital, especially with people who aren't familiar with eating disorders, once you go in and you come out, you're cured, you're done. Oh, you're fine, you're healthy. Oh, you look healthy now, so you're fine. Our favorite saying, isn't it?
And it's always, people always mean well when they say that, and it's like,
they do.
You look back on it now, and it's just like, it's actually it is a compliment. It's just
it's just your brain just takes it as like, oh, I look healthy, that means I look fat.
Like everything else, it's going to twist it into being something completely different.
Exactly. But, once you've reached weight restoration and sometimes even overshooting that, which is very common, more common than not, only once your brain is nourished properly and your body is physically restored, can the real cognitive therapy actually start working.
Yeah, which is hard.
Yeah, it's impossible for a malnourished brain to work properly and to start therapy. It's just
absolutely,
it's just not how the brain works.
And further to that, it's in some cases dangerous.
I think refeeding is just something that it's sometimes really important in a lot of cases that you need it to be monitored and controlled because there are things that can just go so wrong. We say that eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses, and that's that for a reason because of the toll it takes on your body, not just when you're engaging in behaviors, but also when you're going on the road back out. It's, your body isn't supposed to, go through these horrible behaviors.
Extreme
behaviors. Yeah, it's just not supposed to happen. And, you know, it's incredibly difficult on your own. And while I did have the support from my family and my friends, I was responsible for my meals, and every decision kind of became a battle. You follow a strict schedule. It had to be fully prepared, fully organized. I had to keep a food diary, which I then had to take to my dietitian appointments once a week. I saw my psychiatrist once a week. I attended an outpatient program 2 times a week.
It's a bloody full-time job.
It is. Literally the next point in my notes. It's like you're over my shoulder. It becomes your full-time job, and you have to balance that with your actual job, plus your family, plus your friends. And it's just exhausting, and it's so consuming. And at the point you have to sometimes think, okay, all of this recovery, A, is it worth it? And B, is it worth all this effort? And maybe I should just go back to what I was doing, because at least then I was skinny.
Inverted commas.
Inverted commas, yeah. You know, that's just how my brain was thinking at the time, you know?
Of course, yeah.
And that's why relapse is super common. Relapse happens more often than not. And as I carried on gaining weight, my eating disorder started to like slowly lose control. So it began to fight back, and eating disorders morph.
Other ways.
Exactly. Yeah. They morph and change. And so, you know, and as those things change, so do your behaviors. And it was, I'm going to put a trigger warning just here of, at that point I started to pick up habits of purging. Yeah. And in my head, I rationalized, well, if I was eating a full meal plan, maybe I could just get rid of some of it to slow the weight down. Yeah. And of course, eating disorders, they don't work like that, because as soon as you start to cheat a little, you start cheating a lot. And then the purging became more frequent, as did the restriction. And then next thing I know, I wound up back in hospital, this time only for 6 weeks, but I was mentally in a completely different place than my previous admission. I was, I was exercising in secrets. I was not interested. I was cheating. I was, skipping meals when I was on outings. I was
like, I want this. Like,
exactly.
I don't want to be,
I felt like at that point, this was being done to me rather than me actively engaging in recovery. So I wouldn't say the second admission was a write-off, because I learned a lot about, what was required of me. But I think, it definitely, I ended up leaving way earlier than I should have, because actually I was offered an internship at like my dream job. And I said, okay, when this is the only thing I wanted.
Do I remember this?
Yes, you do. Because this is, I think, exactly when we met.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember this internship. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, it was the thing that I wanted so badly. And they were actually willing to hold it for me for 2 weeks.
I remember. Yeah.
And I said, well, I have to do it. But of course, your eating disorder doesn't care if you've got the internship of your dreams.
No.
And I only lasted 2 months on the outside before my condition deteriorated so much that it was actually very life-threatening. And at that point, again, trigger warning, I was pretty much purging everything I ate. My physical health, like on top of restricting. So my body was just running on empty, and purging is so dangerous. It is one of the worst things you can do medically. It completely screws up your body, your electrolytes, your everything. It puts you in it makes you get real bad real quick. And my physical health was really poor. It was affecting my heart rate. My blood pressure was getting very dangerous. And it was just, I think at that point, I finally actually realized, you always think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And you think, oh, I'm not that bad. I'm not that sick. And up until that, I was getting all normal results on my blood tests, but they're always normal until they're not.
They're not.
That's kind of like the last thing that goes. And I think a lot of people don't realize that is they're making sure that, it's...
Your body is literally holding on.
Yeah. Your body is doing everything it can to survive and to...
You do not need those blood results to be bad,
Exactly.
Like, you do not need anything medically wrong to be bad. Like,
especially with mental illness and mental health, how you're feeling in your head and your brain and your feelings, that is the thing that matters most for me. Because your body can do multiple things. The human body is incredibly resilient.
Absolutely,
and it will do anything it can to keep you alive. But that's why you need to just focus more on how you're feeling and being able to, when something's not right, it's not right.
And I find that interesting because, we hear so often that, oh, but my bloods and everything are fine. And it's almost as if people work towards, well, we need to make these bloods bad for me to,
Because in the, like, doesn't that mean that, you're
I'm
doing
sick.
something right?
I'm doing this, I'm being a model eating disorder
Exactly.
person.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting that, I think, because it's like, oh, like, why, like, a brain, and in inverted commas, a normal brain, that's not a normal thing to be wanting.
Exactly. Like, no one should want to be sick. It's just not one of, yeah. And I think the thing that was craziest, I think, was all of this happened when I wasn't even at my lowest weight, when I was actually the most unhealthy. And you really don't think it's going to happen to you, or that your eating disorder isn't that bad, but they are life-threatening. You don't need to look sick and unwell in order to A, be taken seriously, and B, for it not to be critical.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I was admitted for the third and final time in July of 2014, and that's kind of when I realized that, all right, this is it. My eating disorder had given me nothing but a whole bunch of problems and misery, and I realized that I was done with being miserable. I desperately wanted a life without this illness. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give it one shot. And I made a pact with myself, and I said, I'm going to give recovery everything I've got. Mm-hmm. And if I wasn't feeling any better, or my life wasn't somewhat improved by being in recovery after 1 year, then I'm going to give myself permission to go back to my eating disorder. So I'm like, all right, but I have to do it right. I have to go all in. Mm-hmm. In order for me to give myself that permission. So I guess at the end, the out for my eating disorder was there, So I said, if you're not better, you can go back to this. Yeah. But I think I was motivated enough that during my last admission, I wanted to learn everything I could about my illness and, the negative thoughts, so that I could learn how to outsmart it. Because I'm a perfectionist, so I'm going to put this to good use.
I was going to say, it's funny. It almost sounds like you're using your perfectionism for good.
And I'm sure you've heard this, but I've said this 1,000 times, and you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, there it is. But my mantra became, it's not forever, it's just for now.
Yeah.
Because
I love.
Yeah. It's just because everyone thinks that, I guess recovery is often pitched. It's like, oh, and you'll be so much happier once you're recovered. But when you're going through recovery, it's not happy. It's horrible. It just
gets worse and worse.
It gets worse before it gets better. It's super painful, but the pain doesn't last forever. And actually, when you're feeling that crappy, it means that you're healing. And every time you challenge yourself, it slowly gets easier. And I just had to remind myself that when I was going through this pain, it was so I could have a better life and that it would be worth it. I didn't believe it at first, but I just kept telling myself eventually, so that I could eventually prove myself right.
Yeah.
So the last admission I had was about 14 weeks, and I was discharged. But that was, of course, when the really hard work begins. But I was super diligent with my meal plan. I was attending appointments. I found an amazing psychiatrist who did not let me get away with anything. Previous psychiatrists, I feel like I had them wrapped around my little finger. But then Shez came along, and she scared the pants off of me. I am a type of lady who does not scare easily, and here she was, and she put her foot down, and I was like, cool, all right, I respect the hell out of you, so I'm going to listen to what you say.
I'm terrified of you, so...
Pretty much. And, that's kind of, I think for me, I kind of needed that. I needed the tough love kind of stuff. I don't like to know that I'm doing things wrong. So when I found out that I was, if I'm slipping up or I'm, not doing things right, then I want to fix them and I want to be able to do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
It was incredibly hard, but ever so slowly things started to get a little bit easier. The old behaviors started to be replaced by new healthy ones. Challenging the negative thoughts started to get easier, and the positive, or even just neutral thoughts, they didn't even have to be positive, they were just not negative. Yeah. Those thoughts just started to, they started to come more naturally. And I was starting to get a healthier relationship with exercise, because obviously we know that there is, exercise is, it's good for you, and it, releases endorphins, it makes you happy. And, it's part of a healthy lifestyle. moving is just good for the body. So I needed to figure out how to incorporate movement in a way that wasn't going to be triggering for me.
That worked for you.
Exactly. And that is when I discovered my love for weightlifting, which is where I was able to focus on what my body could do rather than what it looked like, and how I needed to nourish my body instead of punishing it. Yeah. Of course, that's not, perfect for everybody, but that's what worked for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think I just started to get a taste of what recovered life could be like. I celebrated every small victory that I could. I learned from every, there were slip ups, of course there were. I remember there was one point when I think I was potentially heading down a negative path, and you actually emailed me. You messaged me and said, I can't follow you on Instagram anymore. I find this stuff, you're too triggering. I can't do it anymore. Oh. You need to get your shit together, because basically, in your nice way.
Yeah. I was like, I'm sure I said it nicer than that, right?
You did. But yeah, you said, look, Ash, you're going down a path. This isn't actually helpful for me to, have this here. I'm letting you know, so I'm not ignoring you. It's because I'm putting myself first. And I think that's when I realized, I said, okay, I'm not giving everything I've got here. I actually need to, do better. I think because I was also, you have this image of yourself that you like to portray of, I was doing better. I was doing really, really well. And then for that, I guess, image to be questioned a little bit of, what are you doing? You're supposed to be inspiring us, and you're just not doing that. I said, okay, no, I'm going to get my shit together. And I think I remember I sent you a photo of my dinner that night, which was, exactly what it was supposed to be. And I said, I'm gonna step it up a little bit more. And so there is a really great thing of being accountable with other people who are going through it. Like, obviously there are times
who
when
you can't bullshit, right?
Exactly. And people who are there to call you out when you need to. Mm-hmm. Obviously there are still relationships that, it can be, that's a tricky one to navigate, depending on where you are in your journey and stuff. But
of course, yeah.
It's at that point, it's exactly what I needed. So it was kind of the kick up the ass, which was great.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
But, it's learning to forgive those slip-ups. And I think
they're going to happen, right?
Exactly.
Like, and it's not like, oh my God, like I've just completely messed up. No, you've just done a little blip, and, it's okay. Keep going.
Blips happen, bad days happen. Exactly.
That's it.
But it was at that point, I think, that I realized that I was closer to the other side than I was, and the past was way darker, and that there really was no point going back. Yeah. And I think I've always said that as soon as I gave up my eating disorder, I started to get everything my eating disorder promised me. I was able to get a job in a field that I wanted. I was feeling, lighter and happier. I got my friends back. I was still, I wasn't in remission yet, but,
you're on your way.
Exactly. I was on my way. I finally found a relationship after that. Again, that was something I really wanted. Yeah. Unfortunately, that, it was a good relationship for the time that it was, but I think also that person was looking for someone who was vulnerable. Yeah. And that ended up being fairly emotionally abusive. But the best part was, I was able to come out the other side and actually outgrow that because of all the things that I learned through my eating disorder. And like, my self-worth was getting better. It's like, no, I don't deserve this. And
no, hang on a second.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think at that point was when I really sort of was in remission, was when I was able to sort of let go of these things that were holding me back. And, after nearly 4 years of darkness, I was starting to feel normal, which I never thought was possible. I hate that word normal, but you know what I mean? Like, I felt more integrated. I felt more of myself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I was, I tackled recovery for another year, and I was declared in remission, and now I've been fully recovered since then. But honestly, recovering from an eating disorder is one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's hard, it's painful and completely unpredictable. It's ups and downs, and it takes a really long time. Yeah. But it is possible. And I think now I still have depression that I manage. I still have anxiety and, a gnarly anxiety disorder that I have to, learn to manage. But, eating well, moving often, I know I know the things that are triggers for me, for my anxiety especially, but I know the things that will make me feel better. I know I feel when I feel like I have a bad day, I feel like I've got some of the coping mechanisms that can help me through that. And, I think also, I had my eating disorder, which was probably, a symptom as well of my anxiety. And then now that I've had the eating disorder out of the way, I can now sort of focus on
The anxiety.
my anxiety and how I manage that and treat that.
Yeah.
Which I think is, super important, because it's hard to do do it all at once,
Especially when you have the one thing that's so all consuming and,
And it's more pressing as well, in terms of severity.
Yeah, yeah. So, so you say you suffer from an anxiety disorder now. Can you compare, like, I'm just thinking, like, back you had an anxiety disorder when you had an eating disorder as well.
Yeah.
And you've still got your anxiety disorder now. And I'm assuming you still, go through bouts of anxiety.
Every day.
Yeah, like, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, but it's one of those things where you're able to, it doesn't consume me 100% anymore. And it's more things that you just have to manage. And I know what I need to do to manage those things.
And do you think you can manage it better now you don't have an eating disorder?
100%.
Like, I know the answer to this question, but like, I'm just interested.
We need the soundbite. It's fine. I have had to, go into hospital again for my anxiety and try and, like, that's where I was actually properly diagnosed, where I thought I had depression. And then my psychiatrist said, no, you've got,
that's anxiety.
You've got GAD. You've got generalized anxiety disorder. Like, that's what's going on here. I guess I do, don't I? That makes more sense. And it's kind of like someone gives you the handbook to your life and you finally realize what's going on. And
That wasn't depression. That was just crippling anxiety.
Because being anxious all the time makes you really depressed.
Yeah,
Shocker.
like, wow, that's good. Yeah.
I actually had this revelation a few weeks ago that when I moved to London for 6 months, which ended up going terribly, but I hated it. It was miserable. But it was funny that I was feeling super upset and completely out of control while I was there. And it's amazing how quickly me wanting to revert back to some of those behaviors happened. I actually started, like, logging food again while I was over there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And it's just amazing how when you have these moments when you're highly anxious or you feel how susceptible you are, and that there are always, potential pitfalls for you to fall through and for things to sort of resurface.
Like a coping mechanism, like, hey, I know what could make me feel better.
Exactly. Or it's like, I don't have any control. I'm not happy with how things are going, so let me give myself a goal or something to do. It was just incredible for me to see how quickly that came back.
And how did you stop that?
I came home and stopped being...
Yeah, cool. I'll do it.
Oh, to be fair, I was absolutely miserable. Like, that wasn't the only reason. But I came home, I realized that it wasn't really working. Fell in love with our producer. And I was able to, have all my friends back. My family was, right there. I'm a homebody, okay?
Yeah.
I love being in my little pod, my little nest with my people and my support network. And I think that just comes down to, how I manage my anxiety is I just need a support network, and I need, people to be there to check in with me and be like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Are you okay?
Yeah.
And this is usually the telltale sign that I'm not. Yeah. And then it's just those people who kind of,
notice
when you're vulnerable enough to sort of give a little bit of yourself, and then people to sort of recognize that. And you don't need to have 50 friends or 50 acquaintances, but to have,
those few that know.
Exactly. Close friends who can, keep you accountable, check in with you, and, help, allow you to be your best self. If I can, use a very cliched saying, but.
No, I like that though.
Yeah. That's my spiel. That's my deal. That's kind of how I ended up where I am. And
amazing.
Yeah.
Can I ask? I have a question.
Please hit me.
So you said that whilst you when you had decided, that you were going to try out recovery properly, you said to yourself that you were going to give yourself a year. If it didn't work out, you were going to go back. We sort of touched on how up and down recovery can be, how sort of like it gets a lot worse before it gets better. During that process, with that promise you had given yourself, was there points during that process where you were like, nah, I'm out, like this is not working, not happening, during any point during the end of it? Obviously, I'm sure that during, the really crap parts of it, you were probably like, nah, I can't do this, I'm going back. Were there any like times where you were like, nah?
I don't think so, because
Okay, yeah.
I think because of the deal I gave with myself that I was going to give it a good shot for 1 year.
Yeah.
And until that year was over, I guess I wasn't able to make a call yet. So yeah, there were times that were really, really hard, and I wanted to, I guess, maybe,
Make it easier?
yeah, to kind of ease the exhaustion I was feeling, I guess, of going through recovery. But at the same time, I also knew that, okay, I made a pact with myself. I need to just give this a good hot go. They told me that this was going to suck,
Yeah.
but it will get better eventually, you know? And I think because I had that in my head,
Yeah.
I was able to sort of, again, the mantra of it's not forever, it's just for now. And I think I had to say that to myself so many times, every time that I didn't want to do it anymore, every time that I thought that I looked horrific, or that I might wanted to crawl out of my skin, or that I was just, or anytime someone made a comment, or those kind of things. You just have to, you know, I think one of the things in recovery is you really learn your values and what's important to you as a human.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't want the way I looked or the way my aesthetic to be one of my values.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the perfect way to end it, you know.
Ash.
I think to wrap this up.
You are incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I know, like you said, you know, you do share it often. One of my favorite things about sharing, and one of my favorite things about sharing my story with people, is just that if people could just take something from that and be like, I'm not alone. I just think that shared experiences, sharing stories, if you can, if you want to, is just so powerful.
Exactly.
It's powerful.
It is powerful. And
so thank you.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It really is. Like I said, I've got help because someone was brave enough to share their story. So if I can at least reach one person, then maybe I can inspire them to take that plunge and, you know, start the long road ahead, which is totally worth it in the end.
Oh, goosebumps. You're amazing.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, for me babbling on. Next time on the podcast, it will be Callie's turn to tell her very inspiring and brave story. But until then, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any episodes. You can follow us on Instagram at pavedwithgoldpod, or send us a Gmail at pavedwithgoldpod@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter at pavewithgoldau, or visit our website, pavewithgoldpodcast.com. All of those links will be in the show notes along with extra resources. And until then, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.
Can't wait. Bye.
This podcast is general in nature and has not taken your personal circumstances or medical history into account. We are here to share our own experiences and the things that we have found helpful throughout our own personal recovery journeys. Please remember that each person's journey and circumstances are different, and not all of the information contained in this podcast may be relatable to you. It's important you consult your own GP or recovery team to seek out tailored advice before making any important decisions relating to your own health and recovery process. If you have found any of the content in this episode distressing, please contact your care team or a medical professional. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs help now, please contact emergency services in your region immediately. See our website for further resources, the link for which is in the show notes.